After all, I say, America could be on the verge of voting its first black female president, Kamala Harris. This is Janet Jackson. Well, you know what they said, supposedly, she asked me. She's not black. That's what I heard, that she's Indian. She looks at me expectantly, perhaps assuming that I have Indian heritage. Well, she's both, I offer. Her father's white, Janet says. That's what I was told. I mean, I haven't watched the news in a few days. I was told they discovered her father was white. The journalist writes, I'm floored at this point. It is well known that Harris's father is a Jamaican economist, a Stanford professor who split from her Indian mother when she was 5. Okay. So this journalist is obviously not a journalist. This person is an activist. They were sent to do this interview for a reason, sent to write this profile piece to make it look like Jenna is crazy, and of course sent to get the quotation she expected, which was that it's going to be amazing to have a black woman as president because, again, they're signaling to black people, get into line. This is your new Obama, despite any evidence that she is black. And so I actually thought, has anybody really investigated Kamala Harris's genealogy? Like, we just keep being told she's black suddenly, and the media keeps overreacting when people say she's not black. And I can't find any evidence that Kamala Harris is black. So I said, I'm going to pause everything and do a deep dive on Kamala Harris's genealogy. Basically, someone came for Janet Jackson, and I answered the door. It was a discrepancy that was in Kamala's book. A woman that she said was her grandmother named Beryl, a picture of her and her grandmother Beryl. Here it is, visiting my paternal grandmother Beryl in Jamaica. And then I did just a brief search online and found out that Beryl allegedly died 4 years before Kamala was born. So that's a major red flag. Then I had a little bit of a gut instinct. The photos that were being presented of Kamala and her grandparents, great-grandmother and Beryl, I just felt that the women, or the woman, because I think they look remarkably alike, I just feel that maybe this woman was the help. And I'm not saying that because she's black. I'm not racist against black people. I am black. I'm saying this because there's just a lack of emotion there. Like, I don't know if it's just my grandparents, but when they're with you, they're like super cuddly and cute. And this woman's just kind of very serious each time that she's being featured here. So anyways, what happened was we sourced Beryl's birth certificate. And then my instinct got a little bit stronger because her name was spelled differently in the birth certificate, right? So you see that it says Beryl spelled B-E-R-I-L, Magdalene. And we know for a fact, by the way, so people that are submitting other birth certificates, this is definitively the correct birth certificate because it says Iris Finnegan. And we know based on Kamala and Kamala's father, Donald J. Harris, that Iris Finnegan is the mother of Beryl. And then we see that her name changes, the spelling of her name changes, rather, by the time that we looked at her marriage certificate. Suddenly you can see that the marriage certificate has her name being spelled with a Y. Now that to me signaled that maybe she definitely is the help, and I'll tell you why. So my grandfather, before he passed away, maybe like 10 years before he passed away, I got kind of obsessed with trying to find all of these documents pertaining to his life, because I realized like that's my ancestry. And I was having a ton of trouble mining his grandmother's information because on each document, her name was spelled differently, as well as other people in the family. And I was like, Granddad, why is everyone's name spelled differently depending on the document? Like, this is very confusing. Why is it sometimes spelled Liza versus Eliza versus like Lizbeth? That was his grandmother's name. And he explained to me that they didn't know how to read and write. So you forget this. You forget that you had a world, the majority of people couldn't read and write, especially if you were not considered like a high-class person. My grandfather grew up on a sharecropping farm. And so what that meant was even if you had a name, if you couldn't read and write, you were going up to the register, whether it was for birth, whatever it was, and you were just telling somebody the name. You weren't saying like, hi, it's Candace, C-A-N-D-A-C-E. You're just saying Candace, and one person might spell it C-A-N-D-I-S. Somebody might spell it C-A-N-D-I-C-E. If you do not know how to read and write, you don't recognize these discrepancies. So that actually, I thought, was a good thing in terms of like my idea that this woman could have potentially just been the help, maybe like on my scent. But I didn't want to be too convinced. Obviously, you know, I lean into the conspiracy mindset because we've been lied to so many times. Kamala Harris published in her book that she was standing next to her grandma Beryl. But Grandma Beryl died in 1960, 4 years before Kamala Harris was born. So who the hell is the real Beryl? Who is that woman standing next to Kamala Harris? Here is the birth certificate for her paternal grandmother. This is Kamala's paternal grandmother, Beryl. Okay, now you can see on this birth certificate that Beryl is spelled with an I. It's Beryl Magdalene. And you can see the reason why we know this is the correct Beryl is because the mother is listed as Iris Finnegan. Later on, we're going to show you in the book, she names Iris Finnegan as her great grandmother. So that would be Beryl's mother. So we have the right woman. Also, formerly, her maiden name is Allen. That is true. It also says here that she's born in October of 1917 in St. Anne. That's the St. Anne parish of Jamaica. And again, you can see it says that it is signed by Iris Finnegan. Very clearly, this is the woman that we are looking for. This is Kamala's grandmother, alleged grandmother, Beryl. It's also interesting, by the way, that it lists her great-grandmother as a seamstress because Donald Harris, Kamala's father, wrote in a 2020 piece called Reflections of a Jamaican Father, quote, Miss Iris, that again would be his grandmother, was the mother of 8 children, too, was the sweetest and gentlest person one could meet, but underneath it was a tough farming woman who ran the cane farm at Thatch Walk near Ainentown, jointly owned with her husband, Mr. Christie. Okay, that's weird. So you're telling me that she ran a farm because on that birth certificate, it says that actually Iris was a seamstress, but whatever. Let's just park that aside for a second and stick with Beryl, this woman who died before Kamala was born, okay? Because I was feeling pretty certain that not too many people were going to be named Beryl and be born in the St. Anne parish of Jamaica in 1917 to a mother named Iris Finnegan. I felt confident that we could find a little bit more data, and in fact, we did, okay? First, we stumbled across Beryl's marriage certificate, okay? So you can see that right here, and now the name spelling has changed. You have Beryl Finnegan spelled with a Y in the same way that Kamala spells it, and it lists their married date as 1944. Again, you can see the parish that is listed is St. Anne Parish. This is where every piece of Beryl's life seems to take place. It reads here that her calling is a barmaid. And something that jumped out at me was the fact that she's married to someone, as you can see, named Lawford Newland. Okay, so Beryl apparently was married more than once because Lawford Newland is not Donald Harris's father, but Beryl is his mother. So just to be clear, again, it says that she married a guy named Lawford Newland in 1944 when she was 25 years old, okay? It's important to note that that would have been 4 years after she gave birth to Donald Harris, Kamala's father. I find that to be very strange. Also, regarding Kamala's father, we cannot seem to locate, regarding Lawland Newland, the person that she married, we can't find him. Can't find him anywhere. We cannot find a birth certificate. We cannot find a death certificate. We can't find a news item or otherwise. I cannot find this alleged Lawford Newland that apparently her grandma got married to. We also can't find a wedding certificate for Beryl and Oscar Wilde Joseph Brown Harris. That is allegedly supposed to be Donald Harris's father. Okay, so Kamala's grandfather is Oscar Wilde Joseph Brown Harris, and we can't find a marriage certificate between the two of them. That's very strange. As speculated, we were able to confirm that Kamala's Black grandmother that she showed us in that picture died in 1960. Before Kamala was born. I can show you right now her death certificate. Let's take a look at Beryl's death certificate, which confirms. As you can see there, it says that she died in July of 1960. It also tells us on the right-hand side, you guys will probably have to zoom in on this, but she died of a uterine infection, uterine fibroids due to a hysterectomy. It has her listed as 39 years. That's actually a couple of years off from 1917, so somebody may have gotten their math wrong here. But you once again see that it lists her birthplace as St. Anne. And so this is a huge scandal. Just an absolutely huge scandal. Kamala Harris published in her book that she was standing next to her grandma Beryl. But grandma Beryl died in 1960, 4 years before Kamala Harris was born. So who the hell is the real Beryl? Who is that woman standing next to Kamala Harris? And do you know what I noticed about that woman standing next to her? She looks a lot like the woman that Kamala claims in her book is her great-grandmother, Iris. Now, that's Iris Finnegan. Here's the book with my great-grandmother, Iris Finnegan in Jamaica. Now, I'm going to give you the side-by-side of Iris and her alleged daughter, Beryl, who died at 39. Now, that woman on the right is not 39 years old. She's clearly much more advanced in her age. I mean, we know black don't crack. I mean, that's just a scientific fact. So I would put that woman on the right-hand side, who she tried to pass off as Beryl, and I think is the exact same person. I would say that that woman looks to be about 65. And then it looks like she's more advanced on the left-hand side. The great-grandmother, that's the same person. When I just believe my own eyes, we're looking at the same person. What do you guys think when you look at those photos? How the hell does a person who is the vice president of the United States pass off a book, claim that these people that are in her book are her black relatives, and nobody bats an eyelash or does even a peripheral search to recognize that the woman that she put forth is implausibly her grandmother? Kamala's got some explaining to do. How did she meet Grandma Beryl almost 20 years after Grandma Beryl died? Because Kamala Harris looks to be about 20 in that photo that she presented. Then there's another bit of a mystery, as I said. If Beryl married after her or before her wedding when she was 25 years old to the missing Newland, if anybody can find Newland, please let me know. But if Beryl married at some point Oscar Wilde Joseph Brown, where is their marriage certificate? And where is their divorce certificate? Again, I'm only prodding the narrative here because I'm going to need proof that she's black. The media has now made this a thing, and now you made it so much of a thing that you're attacking people like Janet Jackson when she asks a very reasonable question that you should be able to respond to. And now we have a verifiable lie that Kamala Harris told in her book, or a big uh-oh, because, you know, if I'm being nice, I guess sometimes you think when you're publishing a book that it's a photo of you and your grandmother that you never met or never could have met. Maybe Kamala was just confused and thought it was her grandma, but it was a grandmother that she had, again, never met. Media should be on this, and they should be asking her this question. How did you make this significant of a blunder in your book? And isn't it quite ironic that every photo that you have presented, two of which look like they're the exact same person, one aged on, which begs the question, is that even Kamala Harris in her lap? I don't know. Again, we're at the beginning of this investigation. But it's interesting that amongst all of the relatives, so many Irish white slavers, the only photos that she chose to put in this book are the ones that make it look as though she might be black. And we have just significantly and without question debunked one of those photos. The press, as you're out there referring to Janet Jackson, is crazy, right? For suggesting, what did Janet Jackson say? She said that she heard that Kamala's father, Donald J. Harris, was Irish. Can somebody pull up that picture of Vioris again? She heard that his family was Irish. I think Vioris, maybe Vioris, Cambridge, might be Irish. Was she so crazy to mention that, press? Would it be so crazy if you guys did your actual job and looked into these things as opposed to constantly trying to obscure things to protect your preferred candidates because you believe she should just be handed this? Now the question is it possible that the woman that we're looking at right there is Kamala's grandmother? Is it possible, based on the records that we have, that Beryl and Donald never did marry? Is it possible Beryl and Oscar, never did marry? Is it possible, is it feasible that that marriage never took place and they both married two different people, and that instead at some point when they decided to blackify Kamala's history, they included this Beryl as her grandmother? Is it possible? I don't want to go too far down conspiracy lane, but I'm telling you that we're close here. This is a big missing piece of her family history that should have been mentioned, okay? And I find it highly suspicious. I do not think that we have answers still on who Donald Harris is. I do not trust him. I do not trust him just having discovered this information and realizing that he left out 2 significant marriages and is instead focusing on Kamala's great-grandmother, referring to her as Miss Iris. Who is Miss Iris actually? I can tell you that, again, we came across all of this in the last few hours, but we're going to stay on them, because now that we have found this piece and we have found this white woman, and again, I'm not trying to call her out for being a white woman. I'm just saying that, like, she is a white woman. She's very white. And Janet Jackson was not crazy to suggest this. And now we know that somebody is putting her in quotation marks as Iris, and a picture is starting to come together. Let me say this. If, and I'm not saying this is true, but if we find out that that woman is Kamala's real grandmother, and can we get a side-by-side of Kamala? If we find out that that is Kamala's real grandmother, and that she decided to appropriate the domestic help who potentially died younger as her grandmother, we are watching one of the most diabolical political moves that we have ever seen in the history of this country. I just want to say that. I'm not saying it's true, again, but I'm saying that I don't like the picture. I always find that the dog that isn't barking, the fact that they never mentioned these marriages, the fact that they laughed people out of the room when they suggested that Kamala Harris could be white, and the fact that they just refused to mention any aspect of this and are remaining hush-hush on it, doesn't make me feel good. I don't trust these people. There's something about Kamala saying she's in these streets that doesn't make me feel that she's being honest about who she actually is. And I'm not going to let go of this. Again, we are getting closer and closer, and I will bet you the DNC is paying attention to this show now. But here is something that we do know about Donald Harris. We know for a fact that Donald Harris was a committed communist. And what do we know about communists in general? Communists change their identities the entire time. They steal identities and they change their name. That is like a witchcraft that they have perfected. Historically speaking, every major communist figure that you know changed their name. They don't use their real names. Joseph Stalin was not Joseph Stalin. Vladimir Lenin was not Vladimir Lenin. Pol Pot was not Pol Pot. A good commie knows that you have to change your identity and continually change your identity. Here's my theory, okay? And again, now we are speculating. We are in the theory zone. So these are not backed by facts. And I'm going to continue to look, and I'll debunk my own theory if I come across different evidence. But my gut is telling me that Donald Harris is simply lying about who he is. I'm not even convinced that he is Kamala's father at all. Because as I said, the lie has to be so big that it was worthy of her changing who her grandparent was in the storyline. What is it that she's hiding? Kamala also looks a little too much like her grandmother. Do you kind of get where I'm going with this? I'm going to show you this picture of Kamala with who we are told is her mother, Shyamala Goplin. But this is just a picture of Shyamala in her youth. And we're going to compare that to who we now know is definitely her relative, Vioris. Who does Kamala favor here? Like, how her mother looks extremely Indian on the left-hand side there, but actually, I don't think she looks like Kamala at all. Who does she favor more? Now, I want to be clear. That's just we're using our own eyes. The reality is that genetics can be extremely unpredictable, especially when you start race mixing. Obviously, you know I have racially mixed kids. I have my son, my third born, has blonde hair. He looks exactly like his father, but he looks exactly like his father. You know, he looks exactly like his father. And I've seen kids that favor their grandparents. Like, that could definitely happen. Like I said, genetics is funny business. You never know what gene you're going to hit. But I am just saying that she really, really, really favors Vioris, who she has gone through great lengths to obscure. I'm actually going to show you a picture of Kamala pictured between her grandparents, or at least Oscar J. Harris and Vioris. Like, I could see that being mom and dad, like potentially being her mother and her father. I don't know. Obviously, I'm just saying that this feels like we are in the right family tree here. Now, there's even more proof, of course, that at the very least, the bare minimum, Kamala Harris is not black. It isn't just Janet Jackson. Funny who the media picks on and who the media stays away from. Because Judge Joe Brown has the credentials. This is a person that they know is intelligent, has had a talk show on TV, I guess you could say a judge show on TV for a very long time. And many of you guys were emailing me clips of him on the show discussing the fact that he knew Kamala's father and that he just simply knows that the family is not black. Take a listen to this first clip before we jump into the second one.
She was everybody's favorite Hindu Indian prosecutor and attorney general and senator, and now she becomes black. But, you know, I met her daddy, fine gentleman, Professor Harris. And the problem with her being black is Professor Harris says he's Caucasian, mixed Irish and Hindu. He doesn't have any black ancestors, but his Irish ancestors owned a lot of slaves in Jamaica and had them to work on plantation. So if mama is on the birth certificate listed as a Caucasian, daddy says he's a Caucasian Hindu and has no black ancestors, how did she get to be black?
I mean, the math is not mathing. How did she become black? It doesn't make sense. Okay? It only makes sense if you stole the identity of the help, which is so sick, so twisted, so diabolical, so offensive that we demand a response to this. Like I said, if a single black person is okay with this and votes for her because the media simply decided to make her black, to essentially wave a little Harry Potter wand and go, oh, okay, we just need you to be black because we need those black votes, right? And you're okay with that, you should really re-examine your life. You should deeply, spiritually search within yourself to determine what is wrong with you, that you would allow this sleight of hand to compel you to vote for this woman, despite her horrific record, by the way, of locking up black men. Who is this woman? Two parents that were committed communists. Who is this woman? And that's not all Judge Joe Brown had to say in the matter of Kamala Harris. Take a listen.
And the birth certificate that she has is interesting because the confusion comes from a mistake. On the birth certificate, it lists the mother's race as Caucasian, national origin India, and religion Hindu. For the father, it does not list national origin. It does not list religion. It does not list anything about that, but where it says race, they put national origin in Jamaica by mistake. Now, if you've ever been to Jamaica and you go over to St. Elizabeth Parish, you see all the high, bright, and white. They live in Jamaica. So I've got a good friend retired from law enforcement. He has a white wife, blonde-haired, blue eyes, but she was born in Jamaica. Her parents were born in Jamaica. One's blonde and blue-eyed, the other one's red-haired and gray-eyed. And they happen to be related to the King of England because they are aristocrats in England, but they were born in Jamaica. It's not unusual. You're not black just because you were from Jamaica, and you have a whole lot of white people that never left, and their ancestors owned a lot of slaves. The Maroons went up into the hill country and got themselves free back in the 1840s, but, you know, other than that, it is what it is in Jamaica. So just because you're from that country does not mean you are of the black race. So the problem is why don't you go get your daddy to give you an affidavit that you have a black ancestor? And since the only possible claim you have is through your great-grandmother, who he says was a Hindu house servant, that just happens to be swarthy, where'd you get your blackness from? See, you're faking it again.
Hindu house servant is what they are alleging that Iris was. And I am telling you, the fact that I just picked up on that in a vibe in a picture, do not tell me women do not have good gut instincts. I was just like, there's just something about the photo. It just wasn't loving. It felt very much like the help who got close with the kids but didn't want to be too close to the kids because, you know, you never know when the mom's going to get upset because you're too close to the kids, kind of a kid situation. A lot of this stuff is just common sense, but it's just not that common anymore. People are just like, I cannot believe my own eyes. I need to read the media, and CNN says that she's Jamaican. And then people were just confused. Like they were literally asking the question, she was in Jamaica. How can you say that she's not black? How can you even ask me this question? Like, where is your common sense? If I up and move to Sweden, I get to suddenly say I'm white? What's wrong with you guys? I mean, this is like common sense. Of course, there are white people in Jamaica. There are white people everywhere. There are white people in Africa. Does not make them black. Elon Musk is not a strong black man. As much as I would love for him to be able to say he's a strong black man to really upset the left, that's just not the circumstance. There's no version of reality that we exist in. And so this is fascinating. This is fascinating because this shows you a tremendous character flaw that we are stumbling upon.